Hello and welcome to the Consistency Project Podcast. My name is Patrick Cummings. As always, I'm here with E.C. Sinkowski. Every week on the show, we aim to simplify the science of nutrition, health, and fitness, cutting through the noise to focus on the principles and practices that will help you perform better, feel better, and live better. Thank you so very much for tuning into the show. Hello, E.C.
Hey, what's going on?
Oh, not much. How are you?
Good.
I
think we're going to talk about nutrition.
I know, big surprise. People were hoping we were going to talk about politics, but no. Nutrition.
No.
There's enough of that. No.
No.
Last week we did a research review. This time around, I don't think this is exactly the opposite, but we're going to look at sort of headlines in the media. So I don't know if those are exactly opposites, but they're two sides of perhaps the same coin.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna. This is a bit of a take on our hot cakes format. Usually in hotcakes, I send you things. This time around, you took my job and you just sent me, here are the three things we're going to talk about. So this is easy for me. This is good. So we've got three different articles or three different things that you came across that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
Any more details than that? Any more context? Or we just jump into the first one?
Jump in.
All right, let's do it. Okay. So the first one is a article. The headline was "New Diet Sees People Lose 16 Pounds by Eating More of Two Things." And so let's maybe just jump in. What caught your eye on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think actually I do these alerts on different media as well to kind of see what's being put out there. And so this article definitely had a bunch of different news articles on it. But I think this example in particular did a great job at, a clickable headline. I mean, just in that headline, to me, there's three things that really would make somebody interested. New diet. Of course, we've got the shiny object syndrome. So we're like, ooh, what's this? 16 pounds is a good amount of weight, more than kind of what we often see in classic diet studies. So that's like, oh, wow, okay, good amount of weight is lost. And then, okay, eating more of these two things. So they make the diet sound so simple. So well done to the headline writers in making this clickable. So what is this amazing new shiny object diet that we've got here? We're going to add protein and fiber to the diet.
Oh, wow.
So once we get below the headline a little bit and read about the diet, it's like, oh, this sounds a lot like Lazy Macros. Now, I'm not trying to say that they copied Lazy Macros. It's just that when we look at the, quote, secrets of successful weight loss diets, they tend to have people increase protein and fiber. And that's exactly what this diet was. Yes, the diet has to cut calories. Of course, that's how we lose weight. But within those calories that you're still eating at a deficit, the remaining calories tend to be best served when they have a lot of protein and an increase in fiber. These are really almost like accepted principles, I think, in the sustainable weight loss community. Now, this study in particular was pretty small. They actually only had 22 people complete the intervention after a year. So meaning the people actually stuck with the whole program for a year, 22 people, and 30 people actually started. So there was a little bit of a drop off of people who started and they're like, yeah, I'm just not going to stick with this for the year. Now, of those 22 that completed the program, only 9 of the 22 were considered successful. And successful means people who lost more than 5% of their body weight. So most of the people who saw the program through, 13 of the 22, were not considered successful because they did not lose more than 5% of their body weight. So when you see that 16 pounds lost in the headline, that's actually an average of the people who were considered not successful, meaning less than 5% of their body weight loss, as well as people who lost way, way more than that. So there's going to be a big range there of actual weight loss. And I'm not blaming the researchers here in the sense that, there was lots of people that were, quote, unsuccessful, because as we've discussed, weight loss is really hard. And this is why some of the weight loss drugs are so popular. They're actually helping people. But I like to remind people of a stat that we said in our most recent weight loss drug podcast episode. And that was that the number of people who are going to be successful in losing at least 5% of their body weight in a year would be 1 in 10. So let's say you have a 200-pound person, they want to lose 10 pounds. They have a 1 in 10 shot of pulling it off this year. Really not good odds. So based on that, this diet approach was wildly successful because out of the 30 people that signed up, almost a third of them actually lost more than 5%, 9 of them. So almost 30% of them actually lost more than 5% of their weight. instead of what that stat is saying, only 1 in 10 are going to be successful. So that's really, really awesome as like a, hey, cool, this diet is really successful. On the flip side of that, I just like to remind people that while this diet's wildly successful, there's still 70 some percent of the people who signed up who were not successful. Yeah, that's just some of the realities of weight loss, especially in our modern food environment.
Yeah. You mentioned lazy macros. Can we maybe do a quick compare and contrast, and maybe even a reminder of what lazy macros is? How does lazy macros compare and contrast to this diet? And did this diet have a name? I can't remember in the article. Did they give it a
I
clever
think they
name?
called it iDip or something, and I think it stands for, individualized dietary whatever plan. So, but yeah, so with this diet, they had educational sessions in a group as well as on their own, as well as some homework throughout the program, which I think is really good, having an educational component. We see that a lot in the different diet approaches that I put out there for sure. I think education is a big piece of that. And what they were doing with this diet to have them increase their protein and their fiber was they were teaching them about protein density and fiber density. So basically finding foods that had a high amount of protein grams per 100 calories of the food, as well as finding foods that have a high amount of fiber grams per 100 calories of that food. And so basically, to increase protein density, increase fiber density, you're going to be steering people towards leaner sources of protein, such that as the protein grams increase relative to the calories, more of the calories are coming from protein, a la tuna, chicken, non-fat Greek yogurt. And then also to increase fiber grams per 100 calories, you're going to be steering people towards fruits and veggies. We've heard that before, maybe some whole grains, maybe some nuts. And so they were coaching people really on how to do this with food choices. So I know they weren't encouraging people like go take fiber supplements. And I know they also worked with individuals to figure out their preferences. Now, comparing that to lazy macros again is to do the 800-gram challenge. So you're eating the 800 grams by weight of fruits and vegetables of your choice. And then you're also going to hit a protein target of this 0.7 grams of protein per pound of body weight. So we're really looking at two different kind of ways to measure things. Mine doesn't individually focus on protein density, and it doesn't actually have the individual's total fiber either. Instead, mine's looking at a total weight of food and a total grams of protein. We're not ever saying, okay, how many calories are you getting from that food? So it's really kind of assessing food in different ways. Now, I don't actually know what foods and calories of all of the foods they were eating in this study, how that ended up. If I had to guess, I think the 800-gram challenge will result in a greater food volume than what they were doing with their increasing their fiber density. So the food volume will definitely help with satiety. And I think in some ways, some variety, because they get to include so many different fruits and vegetables. But on the flip side, the 800-gram challenge does not have a fiber goal. Typically, people, when they increase fruits and veggies, typically will increase their fiber, but it sort of depends on their selections. If they do a ton of green beans and pineapple, for example, they're not going to increase their fiber. So you could say that maybe their diet was a little bit stronger because they actually have a metric on fiber, where on the flip side, maybe the 800-gram challenge is a little bit stronger because they actually get more food volume. And so maybe it helps with satiety. But just lots of different ways to kind of skin the nutrition cat. And at the end of the day, again, so long as we're getting people to eat more whole foods, lots of different things can be successful. I think we're going to touch on protein in a little bit here, but I'm going to say that the lazy macros target of the 0.7 grams per pound is certainly going to be higher than what this diet was having them do. And so I think that their protein density probably helped people find maybe leaner sources. But then my protein target probably has people who are a little bit more interested in optimizing muscle mass. So, again, everything has its pros and cons.
Any reason that you don't pay particular attention to the protein or fiber density in lazy macros, or just generally speaking?
Yeah, I do once we get to the 3 pillars method.
Got it.
So to me, it's kind of, where are we along the progression in the diet? And I don't really want to bog people down with a bunch of data if I can get there without it. Like, I don't want people having to look up in an app and figure out protein density, when instead I think we can get there at looking at simpler numbers.
Yeah. The gym analogy might be like, let's not worry about false grip muscle ups if you don't have ring dips and a bunch of strict pull-ups, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
We can get there, but let's set the habits around whole foods first, and then we can dig into the data as we need to.
Okay. The subhead of this article was, the personalized diet allows people to easily increase the intake of 2 key nutrients while reducing calories, losing fat rather than muscle. Can we talk a little bit about that, losing fat rather than muscle? What does that mean? How does this particular diet pull that off, if it does?
Yeah, we definitely have to hit on that. Now, I didn't see it in the scientific article, but when I looked in the news article giving a summary of the scientific article, they say that they were eating about 80 grams of protein a day, which actually was an increase in where these people had been in terms of their consumption. And 80 grams of protein a day is really not that high. It's going to be lower than that 0.7 multipliers I mentioned. And even at that level of protein intake, they lost more fat than they did muscle. So the average muscle mass loss over the year period was about 2 pounds, and the total weight reduction was about 18 pounds. So the difference there is that 16 pounds, which we already mentioned in the headline. So the scientific article does say that the protein did a good job at preserving the lean mass in a caloric deficit. And so some people are like, well, okay, but they lost 2 pounds. And I'm going to tell you that the trade-off there for such a huge change in their body composition, the 16 pounds of fat loss, I think everybody's going to take that trade-off every day of the week. And I would also say that there's always this error in body composition testing, such that when we're looking at 2 pounds different of lean mass, how much of that was truly lean mass versus just some of the error that's associated with these tests, I don't know. But one of the bigger points that I wanted to bring up here is, again, I know I'm harping on this a lot, but I would say most of my clients come in my opinion, overshooting their protein target. And so this is just another example where you don't need all of this protein. Now, you could say that these individuals were not optimizing their protein intake for muscle mass gain. And I certainly would agree with that. I don't think they even were doing resistance training. But here, at just 80 grams of protein intake, they had the ability to pretty much preserve muscle mass loss in a more severe caloric deficit than I put in people. So again, why do we have all this fixation on the 1 gram per pound? I don't know. Still looking for all the evidence for that.
Got it. All right, let's jump into topic number 2, article number 2. This is on Blue Zone data and perhaps the fault in that data. It was an interview with, I'd never heard this before, but the Ig Nobel Prize with Ig Nobel, who said, so it's an interview with somebody who won that prize, who said that the data on human longevity is faulty. Let's do a little bit of background, maybe talk about what the Ig Nobel Prize is, if it matters at all.
Yeah, it was the first time I'd heard of it too. Ig Nobel Prize is sort of like the cousin comedy awards of the actual Nobel Prize, which I think we all know what that is.
Yep.
But I guess Ig or Ig stands for Ignatius, who they made up as this fictional cousin of Alfred Nobel, who was the actual founder of the original prize. And so the intent of the Ig Nobel Prize is to make you, quote, laugh, then think.
Yep, I like
so
that.
This year, one of the winners was, I think they do multiple winners a year, but this year, one of the winners was a researcher by the name of Saul Justin Newman. And he's a researcher who looks at longevity. And basically, his research has concluded that most of the claims of the people who are living over 105 are just totally inaccurate and wrong claims. And he points out that in the blue zone areas, which of course we've talked about on a podcast or two, these areas where supposedly people live to 100 years old at much higher frequency than other places, he really highlights that the problem is that these people who say that they're 105 or 110, we don't actually have a birth certificate, or some of these areas just don't report death because a lot of these countries have people living on pensions. So people aren't going to report when their father dies who's 105 because they want to keep getting the pension check, right? So as I guess he says, quote, the secret to living to 110 years was don't register your death.
Right. This is funny. Reading through the article, it actually did that. Made me laugh and then made me think. It's very well aimed. Yeah. So, okay. So does this, or in light of this, does it change your opinion, your thoughts on the, like you mentioned, we talked about blue zones, at least in a couple episodes. Does it change your mind or your thoughts on that topic?
Not really. I think it was in the Blue Zone paper that I cited in one of those episodes, but it might have been in the Netflix documentary that we also discussed. They bring up the fact that they are aware that some of the birth certificate data could be wrong or is just missing. People don't have them sitting around their house 110 years later. And my point was, and I think I even said it in the podcast episode, was I don't actually really care if they're living to 100 or 110. I mean, if you have a population that's in their 90s, even heck, their late 80s, who are still active and living independently, like that's still a population that we want to study in terms of these diet and lifestyle, quote, hacks. I mean, if our average death age is 76 and it comes with a bunch of comorbidities, people living into their 90s independently with a high quality of life, that should still interest us, right? Now, I think the other thing I want to say is if we go back to the Blue Zone episodes, I don't ever latch on to any of what I would consider some of the hacks. I think
Yep.
sometimes they found, let's say in a Netflix documentary, that some of the cultures really liked a specific type of honey, and then another culture was really stoked on tea. And my point was, hey, ignore all that stuff. Like that's
Yep.
not going to get you this elite health. Instead, we're going to look at the commonalities across these cultures, regardless of what age they are, and you're going to find some really basic stuff. Eat mostly whole foods to include a good amount of plant foods. We've heard that one before. Don't eat too much overall. We've heard that one before. Be active. And so I think those basic tenets are going to be true regardless of what we find in terms of their birth certificate and whether or not they truly live to 100, 105.
Anything from, I'm going to pull up his name again real quick. Hold on. Where was his name?
Saul
Justin Newman. Anything from his research that is actually perhaps useful, that maybe steers us away from quote unquote longevity hacks to something that we can learn from and something we can actually action?
Yeah, I did like his statement, quote, longevity is very likely tied to wealth. Rich people do lots of exercise, have low stress, and eat well, end quote. So I do think there is something about wealth. I don't think it's always a one for one. I think sometimes wealthy people might not always eat the best and might not always exercise, but
Yep.
I do think wealth definitely affords the opportunity for those things. And so I'm confident that's correlated. I know that wealthy people, for example, won't be subject to malnutrition, which is certainly a problem for millions of people around the world. And then, of course, wealth also affords them to have access to all the doctors for preventative care and even treatment care. And of course, then they generally do have the resources to have more time for exercise and eating well. So I think that is an interesting observation and probably is quite accurate. I think the other thing that I don't remember him seeing or didn't see him call out directly is just genetics. Maybe what we really need to find among these people who we think are close to 100 or whatever are actually their genetic commonalities. And, of course, we have to verify that they actually are whatever age we think they are. But hey, what are their genetic markers that make them live so long? Because I think we all know or have heard of these stories of people who live into their 90s and they just eat like candy corn and bourbon or something, right?
Yeah. That's my diet. That's not yours? Wait.
Candy corn, that season is upon us. So, but yeah, I mean, I think, maybe eating right and exercising were the default conditions pre-industrial times. And then the truly old people in those times are just won the genetic lottery. And so maybe there's no real hacks to genetics. And so diet and lifestyle might be potential hacks for the people who didn't win the genetic lottery, right? Like the people that keep getting to 110 are going to be the genetic freaks. And then the people who maybe get into their 90s might be the diet and lifestyle people who didn't have quite the genetic freak lottery tickets.
One of the things that he said that I was reading that I thought was really interesting was instead of, because to your point, a lot of people lose birth certificates or they're just wrong or, whatever it might be, is the better approach would be, can we figure out a way to actually test how old a person is, whatever it is, genetically, biologically, however, whatever the magic test might be, so that you can actually see, oh, you are at least in this range of
totally
70 to 80 or 75 to 80, however accurate it can go. I thought that was a really interesting, that to me seems like, again, is like laughable that we can't do that. And then it's, that would make way more sense.
That would be helpful for sure.
Yeah, especially now, because we seem to be, and we're likely to continue, like we're in this phase of longevity, everything, right? Everybody's trying to get everybody to live longer. And so, well, it would probably make more sense if we can measure what that even means.
If these people truly are as old as we think they are. Yes.
Right.
I agree.
Exactly.
Step one.
Okay. Yeah. Step one. All right. That was the second one. Our third one is not an article, but it is a product, which I had never heard of this. So this
really?
Is,
okay. Yeah. You're going to be
I'd never come across this. So it's a new protein bar, which normally, of course, we wouldn't care. Right. There's lots of protein bar, but this one's interesting. It's called the David Bar, and it's got Peter Attia as the chief science officer and Andrew Huberman as an investor. It's also, I did a little research, Peter Rahal, who is the co-founder of RX Bar, is the co-founder of this company as well, which I just thought was interesting because he was successful with a protein bar once, sold it for a ton of money. Apparently can't get it out of his head because he's making another one. And so what the heck is going on with this protein bar? Why is it worth pulling out and talking about, other than maybe the three names I just gave, which might be reason enough?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's exactly that. It's getting attention because of the names that you mentioned. And I'm going to say that the marketing is laid on pretty thick here with the David Bar. So it's called David after Michelangelo's David, the sculpture made around 1500, which is generally known as the perfect image of man in terms of physique. And the first header on the David Protein website is, quote, "Humans aren't perfect, but David is. Introducing the most portable protein on this planet," end quote.
Mm-hmm. On this planet. I like
Yeah.
that. On this planet. They're
Not
granting the
Mars,
chance
everybody. We're not talking about the Mars protein bar.
They're granting that there could be a more portable protein, which is another term I've never heard
Right.
of. But go ahead. Anyways.
So it's being marketed as this super idealized protein bar in terms of the protein to calories ratio, which we will discuss. But I mean, the other thing I couldn't help from smirking. Why does a protein bar need a chief science officer? Like, I understand, you're making a food product that you probably want to talk to an RD or nutritionist, especially if you don't have the qualifications. But a chief science officer, like this protein bar is going to be on the cutting edge of nutrition research. I mean, yeah, it seems a little silly to me. But of course, that's all part of the marketing image. It's this perfectly designed bar. So of course you need a CSO for position for this protein bar, right? And if that wasn't enough, the protein bar takes itself even more seriously in its ingredient list, where normally we just get a list, one long list of the most common or most used ingredient down to the least used ingredient. Okay, their ingredient list is divided into 4 categories of the protein system, the binding system, the fat system, and the flavor system. I mean, all right, I guess we need special systems to deliver your nutrition. So this thing is just dripping with marketing, and that's exactly what you are paying for. It's $39 for a box of 12 or $3.25 a bar, and that's before shipping, of course. So you're paying for this image of this perfect protein bar that's, chiseled under the watchful eye of a Tia, and it's just it's too much for me. I can't take myself seriously eating the David protein bar.
It's so interesting. I hadn't thought about it, but you're right. It's a protein bar that's taking itself so seriously. And if you go through the website, that's the overriding vibe. Is like, this is the most serious protein bar you will ever eat, which is, it's
silly.
Which is actually, it's interesting because it's kind of the opposite of RX bar. And I don't remember exactly what the RX bar sort of marketing was, but it was kind of tongue in cheek almost.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that he's going in this sort of direction. So
I would argue that RX was kind of known for more minimal. That was the whole thing, was like,
maybe
really
that's what it
Whole
was.
Foods, and even their packaging, at least in the beginning, was very minimalistic.
Very simple. Yep.
So in some ways, I guess you could say that they're trying to keep this like natural, but it's just way too serious.
Yeah. I would actually recommend folks check out the website because it's trying. I don't know, maybe it's working, but it's trying real hard. What is this is the important question, of course, not the marketing. Right. What is the actual nutritional profile of this quote unquote perfect protein bar?
Yeah. I mean, that is the big selling point of the protein bar, that it's got 28 grams of protein and it's only 150 calories. So we have to do some of this nutrition math to understand this whole marketing or this big plus of this protein bar. Each gram of protein is 4 calories. So if we take those 28 grams of protein and we multiply it by 4, that's 112 calories just from the protein grams. Now the whole bar is 150 calories. So 112 out of the 150, 75% of the calories in this bar are coming from protein. And that's a very high percentage. Very little is coming from carbs and fat. I mean, we've discussed protein bars before on the podcast, and some of the bars, the best bars you can find on the market, only 40% of the calories are coming from protein. So here we have this David bar is up at 75%. Now, how the heck do they pull this off? Well, it's funny. If you do the math on all of the macros, so the protein grams times 4, plus the carb grams times 4, plus the fat grams times 9, you actually come up with 186 calories, not 150. So why is that? Well, it's because they use allulose as a sweetener. And allulose is this naturally occurring sweetener that isn't really metabolized, meaning it's not really used for calories in the body. Basically, you eat it and then it's excreted unchanged for the most part. And so the FDA, because it is a carbohydrate, it does make it come under the carbohydrate like total carbs. But then instead of making it have 4 calories per gram, the FDA says that you can have it be valued at 0.4 calories per gram. And so the fact that they use allulose in this bar as their sweetener is what helps bring the calories down. Now, there are some other types of carbs in the bar that will get the 4 calories per gram, but this is what's used in their quote binding system. And that's the main reason of this discrepancy.
For folks listening, she just rolled her eyes when she said that. I just want to make sure that that's on the record.
In their binding system. So that's the main reason that if you were to do the math on the protein, carb, and fat grams, you're not going to come up with the 150. Now, this isn't trickery. The calories that your body will actually use are going to be closer to this 150 number. So it really is about 28 grams of protein for 150 calories. And yes, is going to be quite good in the sense of a protein source, especially from a protein bar.
I don't think I've ever heard the term allulose. Is there anything else you can give us? Is this, I mean, I don't want to use the word new, but is this a new way to get food into us, or is this been used around and I've just never heard it?
Yeah, I think it has increased in popularity because it's a sweetener. So we can start making sweet things, and then it's very low calories. I think I've seen beverages where basically they get to be 0 calories because they're sweetened with allulose. But yeah, so I don't think it's new per se. I think there's always testing in different sweeteners to see how do we like the sweet taste? What are the calories? How does it mix with food? So I think we're always going to be seeing these kind of new offshoots of it. But yeah, it's increased in popularity more recently.
Interesting. Okay. Speaking of taste, do you recommend this bar? Have you even tried this bar yet?
I have not. I will try it if they sell it in stores. I'm not ready to buy a box of 12, at 39 plus shipping for the perfect protein bar. I just can't take myself that seriously. But yeah, I mean, I recommend it in the sense of if somebody gets the protein they need and the bar fits within the context of their whole diet, sure. I mean, it's going to be the same answer for whatever food somebody might ask me about. But, I do like to remind people that this bar isn't just going to, poof, make weight loss really easy. The landing, they haven't hacked nutrition team. I mean, the landing page, another quote on their landing page is, quote, more protein and fewer calories helps you increase muscle and decrease body fat. This protein bar does just that, end quote. And it's like, maybe. I mean, certainly you're getting more protein and less calories than many bars out there. In fact, you mentioned the RX bar. You are getting about double the amount of protein and I think about almost 100 calories less than a typical RX bar. So certainly a big improvement there. But if you compare it to something like a Bear Bells bar, which I've recommended before, you're getting about 8 more grams of protein and about 50 less calories. And so then it's on the order of it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Right. So it's always going to depend on, okay, what are you replacing? And then more so, what does the rest of the diet look like? I can assure you there are going to be people who are eating David protein bars and do not have the body composition that they want. And that there's also going to be people who are eating David protein bars and do have the body composition they want. There's never one product that's going to totally sway the rest of the diet. Right. So if you really love it, if it fits well within your entire protein and calorie needs, go for it. I just don't think it's a panacea, nor does everybody, need to rush out and buy the David bar.
Dig it. All right. Well, then if I happen to stumble across a David bar, I will also try it. But
yeah, let me know.
Probably won't go out of my way.
Yeah, right now they're just shipping only. They're not in retail yet. So we're going to have to wait, Patrick, for perfection.
Okay. Thank you, EC. That was fun. Is there what's the best way for folks if they come across, I think we talked about this. Well, we always talk about it with Quick Bites. Yeah. I don't remember if we mentioned it with research, but if folks have like a headline, an article, a research thing, like what's the best way to send them off to you in the hopes of perhaps you and I talking about it in a future episode?
Yeah, the best way is through email. So if you're on my email list at optimizemenutrition.com/email, you can click reply to anything that I send out. That's the best way. Some people do reach out on Instagram. I'm going to tell you that organizational system is not as robust. So
It's chaos.
I tried, but stuff gets lost in the shuffle there.
All right. Thank you, EC. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. Do make sure you are subscribed wherever you are listening to this or watching it so that you do not miss another episode. EC and I will be back next week for a brand new episode of the Consistency Project podcast.